Welcome, everyone. Really glad to have you all here, and really glad to have this amazing panel we've got here. People who explore the world are great contributors here in the virtual worlds and guides as we see where the world is going. And today we're getting hints of where virtual worlds and the metaverse in general are going. And I want to introduce the crew here as we get started. First, if you look around, you'll see there is a little placard next to me. If you need accessibility or things like that, you can click here and see what's going on. The next expert series, we can talk about that. You can see it over to the right with Caesar Lighthouse. And other information is available around our area here where the presentation will occur. But let's get right to this. This is the VR Exploders Club panel. And today they'll be presenting to us, answering a variety of questions on where things are going in the metaverse. First, Marie Vans, who's Anne Vans Lapis here in the virtual world. She's a former research scientist at HP Labs and associate professor at Colorado State University. She's a driving force in the scientific research and a developer and leader in virtual world science education development. Then Bethany Winslow, director of the iSchool online learning graduate program at San Jose State University. She's led instructional design and taught online courses. She's also led support systems at San Jose for emerging learning technologies such as VR and generative AI. Tom Boellstorff, a professor of anthropology at the University of California, Irvine, author of Intellivision, How a Video Game System Battled Atari, and Almost Bankrupt Barbie. He works both in Department of Informatics and Anthropology and is co-editor of the Princeton Studies in Culture and Technology. Then Valerie Hill, Valibrarian, with a PhD in Library and Information Sciences. In 2012, Val brings over 20 years of library experience to her work as director and virtual community librarian here in Second Life and elsewhere in the metaverse. She's a professor at Peninsula College. She's author of Metamodernism and Changing Literacy, Emerging Research and Opportunities. Next, Shannon Broden, who is Kreatya Shannon in Second Life. She holds a Master's of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University with an emphasis in emerging technologies, and an MA in Communications from California State University, Fullerton. Her recent article, Bring the Arcadia System Assets Archive to OpenSim, was published in the summer of 2025. So we'll start off with a great round of questions. So welcome, panelists, and we can start out with just general questions in terms of who wants to go forward. We don't have anything pointed to particular individuals, so I'll just throw the first question out there. And I think this is maybe something for people who are unfamiliar with this group is particularly good. Why do we need to explore other worlds?
I think I'll start with that. So the VR Exploders Club came about because we had heard that we were all in Second Life, and we had heard that Second Life was doing a VR platform called Sansar, and we thought maybe we should go check that out. And after we checked it out, we realized, well, this is the future. And so we decided that we would start looking for all kinds of different platforms, social VR platforms across the metaverse, to see if there were any that were as good as Second Life that we could do education in. And so I feel like for us to be on top of everything, we should know what these platforms are, and we should understand their affordances and how they can be used for education.
Thanks, that's great. Anyone want to contribute to that perspective? I think that's a great place to start right there. Thanks.
Sure, I'll go next. I explore all around the metaverse with the VR Exploders, and the main reason is because I care deeply about the next generation of learners, and learning today is nothing like it was when I was a child. So I believe it's really important for us to understand where the kids are today beyond their physical school classrooms. And so my colleagues sitting here know that I've had experience with two VR headsets, which I really dislike. But I'll probably purchase a third one at some point just to compare immersive experiences. To date, I much prefer what we all have come to call desktop VR on my computer over the trapped feeling that I get in a headset with a headset. I lack the tools that I need to teach and learn and work when I have a headset on. But here in Second Life, the interface has everything I need. I can be fully immersed in 3D learning. So while Second Life is the best in virtual environment, in my opinion, currently, and it's what I like to call the original metaverse, we have to realize it's not the only platform out there. So even if you're not in the VR Exploder Club, you can become aware of the many evolving platforms by connecting with my colleagues here. One may not master all the evolving platforms, and I have yet to master Roblox, where we've all been there. I'm not even sure I want to, but we can certainly become aware of where the kids are spending their time.
I'll follow up behind Val with that. As was mentioned in the introduction, I also have a Master of Arts in Communications, as well as my more recently earned Master of Library in Information Science. And I've always come from the perspective, you need to meet people where they're at in order to communicate, and in this case, also to educate. So I personally find it very valuable to learn about all the different environments, how people are approaching what they do, how do they express themselves. And I also recognize, as somebody who also went back to school and got a second degree, that we always continue to want to learn. There's potential for that. So it's who are we reaching? Like Val specifically reaches people, as she mentioned, in a certain age group. I tend to look with my background and the double master's degrees, I'm set up where I am in this state to teach community college if I want, or work with adult lifelong learning. And that's the key. Where are people comfortable at for the content that it is we want to teach? And that's part of why I came back to look at library science, was the content side of it, was to see how the two of them could come together. And I had the wonderful fortune of being able to join in with the VR Exploders very early during my student journey as well. So I got to grow by meeting other people, by seeing what other people were doing, and then how to take that into my further adventures.
Thanks. I think something I think we should also clarify is why, okay, I should never ask a question I don't know the answer to in a presentation. I'm going to do it anyway. Why is the Exploders Club called Exploders instead of Explorers?
Okay, that was my mistake. I said my first email to people to say we're starting this new club and it's going to be the VR Explorers Club, but I made a mistake and it came out Exploders, and then later we thought that was pretty funny, so we kept it.
That's great. I think there's so many things that happen in science and in art and in Second Life that are just like that. So that's a wonderful story. Thanks. So the next question we've got coming up, and I think this relates closely to the first, is as you've described in terms of we're exploring, we're out there looking for what's happening next. Part of what this presentation about is sharing with the public what really is next, what you're seeing as being the incipient future in front of us, what's emerging right now. And if we can go around with each one of you, maybe just in a row, so it makes it easier for people to know who's next. Marie, if you can maybe start, what do you see out there that would be what's coming in next now?
Well, so yeah, I think one of the reasons why we settled on Roblox is because Roblox is one of those platforms that has millions upon millions, like between I think Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite, it's like something like greater than the population of the U.S. active monthly users. And so I feel like this is where and you know, obviously the target audience there are kids, but the thing is they're growing up in these spaces. So once they reach higher ed, you know, and we can take advantage of these platforms, we're going to get to them again. It's going to be more engaging for them if we are using these platforms for teaching. And I feel that's where we're headed. I feel like that's sort of Web 3.0 and or 4.0, wherever we are in the web. But that's one of the reasons why we're looking at these, is because we do want to reach, you know, those 450 million active monthly users in where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll dovetail onto what Marie said, but also what Shannon, who's one of our graduates, said. And I put it in chat that, you know, and the iSchool went into Second Life in 2009, and it's because our programs were 100% online. So when we think about what was available to us then, it was how can we as an online program, you know, gather our students together in a space if we're, you know, wanting to meet synchronously, right? In an asynchronous program, you might want to have meetings in person, and how do you do that? So that's what brought us to Second Life all those years ago. And we still need to meet people where they are. And I've been an advocate even before I came to the School of Information. And I've actually just recently transitioned back to my previous department. So I'm actually the e-learning specialist over at the Center for Faculty Excellence and Teaching Innovation. And I'm still the lead over at the iSchool, working with their programs and still supporting the iSchool Island and all that stuff. But it really is about what, as Marie said, the kids are growing up in these spaces. And for many years now, it's been, for as long as I've worked with, and even before I started getting involved with VCARA, I wanted to, as an instructional designer, I was trying to work with faculty to say, you know, learning how to use virtual spaces, this is sort of the way of the future with education and gamified learning and all that sort of thing. And I still feel very strongly that way. But I've come to the conclusion that this is still a niche interest for many people. And I do think, too, something that is coming forward that we can maybe talk more about is there's a difference between what we do in these desktop environments and what we've done synchronously gathering together, and what I think most education with VR headsets is. It's very, very different. These desktop worlds and the environments that we've been exploring, and Roblox is what we've kind of concluded is the best, are social spaces where people hang out together and build together and play games and do things. And most educational VR are sort of these standalone experiences that are very, very targeted and very niche. They don't have that same social component. So I think there's a very distinct rift that I think for a long time, some of us in the VR Exploders, I think we were looking for virtual reality spaces that are social, right? And I think there's a lot of educators that are interested in VR who don't have a need for that social component, or I think they're missing that social component. So there's a distinction there that is part of all this mix. That's it.
Thanks. I thought that was great. Tom, if you want to go ahead.
So I didn't answer the first question, but just to chime in on these things. So I've known many of you for so long, but I, you know, my background in some ways and interest links up to this because it is a little different. You know, I got my PhD in anthropology at Stanford in 2000, and I've been a professor at Irvine since 2002. My original work was in Indonesia, and my book Coming of Age in Second Life came out in 2008. I mean, it's 18 years ago now. And for me, you know, one reason why the Exploder is so important, or that, you know, part of that work is, it's not just for me about education, but because I'm an anthropologist, comparison is a very important part of what we do, right? Is looking at different cultures or different societies, different ways of being, is how you learn about your own or other cultures, in part through comparison. And these platforms have different ownership structures, different ways they're set up, all of these different possibilities. And so looking at those, for me, is valuable in and of itself, just to know what is out there in that sense. And I see that as of a piece with what you do in the physical world. And I just can't emphasize enough how happy and how much I agree with the way that people have been talking about why all of this matters. First of all, the idea of social immersion. There continues to be such confusion about sensory immersion versus social immersion. And when Jaron Lanier and other people coined that term virtual reality, it really led us, so many people, down a wrong path. And it still does to this day, because the degree to which something is real or not has nothing to do with the sensory immersion with it, right? That's very ableist, first of all. We know plenty of blind and deaf folks in virtual worlds all the time. That's not what makes something real. And as several people noted, you can have VR on a flight simulator on a laptop that's not even connected to the internet. And the social immersion, the desktop virtual world or the mobile phone virtual world, even virtual worlds like VR chat that are emphasizing VR always have some kind of desktop mode, because you can't build typically in the VR mode, or people get ill, or it's not what you are looking for, because social immersion doesn't require that. And I think that, this is, I've been writing a little bit right now about this, and I'm teaching 2 classes right now, so I do think about education a lot, and so many things going on right now in my life. It's just a really busy time. But one thing that I think is a great reason it's to have this conversation right now is we are at the bottom of a hype cycle where AI is now the wave of the future, and everyone is pronouncing the death of the metaverse, and Zuckerberg is laying off people at Meta. And this hype cycle, which we've seen for decades in the tech industry, is so damaging to inquiry, to research, to learning, because it's this sort of go big or go home kind of mentality. And someone was talking about the size of virtual worlds, and I've often said anthropologists don't just study China and India. You can learn a lot from a society of 2,000 people. That there's, we need to talk about a metaverse of hundreds. And I think right now, when people have pronounced the death of the metaverse yet again, right? We get this every 10 years or so. And, the AI is rising, is precisely a wonderful time to be thinking and exploring and talking about the metaverse when it's at the bottom of a hype cycle, because I promise you it's coming back. And AI will obviously be an important part of it. And so I think these explorations are so important and so valuable, absolutely for education, but also for the human journey. And we are in this dangerous moment right now where the corporate ownership of so many virtual worlds out there is getting so overwhelming that looking at what people are actually doing and what the possibilities are, and the creative things that people are doing to push back against governance and surveillance, is incredibly valuable.
So true. That last point I think is so important, as well as the idea of social immersion. I remember the old BBS and the Usenet news groups, on and on from there, did not require high levels of sensory input in order to feel highly engaged. Thanks. So if we can go on, Val, if you can address the same question,
Sure.
where's the metaverse heading?
Yeah, where are we headed? And thank you, Tom. You pointed out some great things and reminded me one of the reasons I love the VR Exploders is just the opportunity to explore with these amazing colleagues that have different perspectives. And we're all extremely busy, but we all agree that this is important work, this exploration. And as far as the future, well, we can't predict. So far, I don't think the future is with headsets. At least I don't think, not at this particular time. The idea keeps coming up, though, about interoperability. It comes up quite a bit when talking about the future of the metaverse. I liked what James Wagner-Au said when he did an expert talk here at VWEC. He suggested that platforms come and go. There may never be one big metaverse where we can hypergrid jump, which is possible in the open sim worlds. He also shared the idea that some people will never really enter the metaverse because they're unable to experience it as a real place, which it is. It's virtual, but it's real, suggesting that concrete learners may not think in metaphorical terms of meaning. So the metaverse can be used for many purposes, and certainly education is one of them. Yet, the metaverse will never be the only place for education. Just one of the many tools for educators that are evolving. And I feel this is a meta-modern concept because we oscillate between physical and virtual life, and we oscillate between concrete and abstract tools. So it's my hope that the metaverse will be used purposefully for teaching and learning while maintaining respect for the wonder of the physical world and physical connections. So on to Kreatya.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to follow up on that per se, because there's so much that's already been said. I do want to go back and echo what Bethany was saying about the two different tracks between the VR experience and the social experience. I noticed that in the times that I went when I was an SJSU student, I got to go and work our school booth when we were exhibiting at places like the American Library Association conference. And we had back then, before it had gone down, had been working on an orientation room in Mozilla Hubs. We had done it browser-based, working on it as a group, and then we took it to, that year it was Chicago, and had allowed people to experience it on browser and also experience it on headset. The final time that I went to one of the conferences, and I was actually attending a panel that the school was doing, but as a student, and they passed around the devices that they were working with at that point. And I noticed the shift that what the students were working with, the demos that they were working with, were more the immersive experience type of things. And again, it's meeting people where they're at. We're going to have a certain group of people that want the social experience, and groups of people who will want the more immersive experience. And it's trying to figure out, I think, for the content that is wanting the focus on for education, what is the best way to get it to which group. I think that would be the main thing I'd want to emphasize.
Thanks. I think that's a really big point. How do we see that going forward? And I appreciate you talking about some of the dynamics engaged in that discussion. If we look at our next question, what are the benefits of these platforms specifically for education? How can we use it? And if you can, I don't know if we need to always go down the line, but if somebody has a particular point you can get us started, then let's make sure everybody has a voice in this question also.
Yeah, I can address that. So I teach three classes using these platforms, and the biggest thing that I have noticed, and these are all sort of mid-career professionals, most of them are mid-career professionals that are coming back to school and really are not, avid gamers. And what I noticed is that when I'm teaching my class, so typically we start out in Zoom and I have a PowerPoint presentation, and everybody's camera is off, and you have no idea if there is actually a person behind that camera when I'm doing the lecture. But when we jump into one of those platforms, into any, not to Second Life, because it's these people have not, it's mostly web-based, because these people have not had enough experience with other interfaces to be able to jump into Second Life. But what I notice is suddenly everybody's engaged. People are talking, people are curious, suddenly everybody is there, and I know they're there. And I know they're there because they're walking around and they're looking at stuff and they're asking questions. So I feel like, that's one of the biggest benefits of these platforms, is especially for distance education when everybody's geographically dispersed, that it does feel like you're in a classroom with them. You're all together. That's what I think.
Thanks.
I totally agree. That's the best part. So as far as the difference, I think that was the question, right, Mehdi? You said the difference between VR and desktop is. I'm sorry, if you can repeat the question.
The benefits for the education platform.
Yeah.
What's good for education in these things?
Well, okay, so I think that's really the critical question here, and I think one of the things about the VR exploders, we've been very much shaped by what we've been involved in for so long, which is Second Life, the desktop, the social aspect, right? That learning doesn't happen in a vacuum; it happens with other people and community, but there are other uses for VR headsets, right? Where you want to feel immersed in something and you don't necessarily need the social component. So the problem is and I think somebody else had mentioned it, was probably Val mentioning some of the other speakers who talked about this. There's not going to be, I don't think that there's going to be a centralized metaverse. I think it's going to be decentralized. I think it's inherently going to be, it's going to be different tools for different use cases, right? There's if you want it to be social and explore something together, you're going to need something that's a social platform. But if you need to interact with a very sophisticated digital twin scenario, something or other to complete a task, that could be done in a headset and it has nothing to do with being social, and it doesn't need to be social. But being in a VR headset where the visuals and where the sense of a real sense of urgency or just dangerous situations or whatnot, it's going to be different tools for different learning, right? We always have to start with those learning objectives first. And I've seen a lot of things where I think that they've developed things for VR that aren't necessarily, VR isn't really the necessarily the appropriate tool. So sorry, that's as coherent as I can be at the moment.
That was good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Bethany,
go ahead.
That makes total sense to me. Even before I was doing any of the communications studies, I actually worked in animation television, and there's some types of storytelling. You look at it like, was animation the most appropriate way to tell a story, say, over live action, and why? Now, in this case, you're looking at the same thing, but I think it's for the content, what is the reasoning to put it in a virtual environment? Is it to have people experience a destination that they can't travel to practice and see, maybe if you're dealing with health stuff, medical procedures or health-related topics that can't be experienced any other way, sort of like pictures in a book don't quite do it. And I think that is one of the key things to look at. I see one of the comments is about the interactivity as well. What is the importance of being able to learn by the interaction with something that may not otherwise be practical? And back to the original part of the not learning in isolation, I think also came up at one point. One trend that I've seen with a lot of the more adult learning is that the community colleges, the four-year schools, my entire program, like Bethany was saying, for San Jose State University, we were completely online, and the most that the students ever met each other, unless we went to one of the conferences, was on Zoom for class projects. And that idea of more asynchronous learning but looks from my perspective to becoming more of the norm. And again, going back to that whole split that we were talking about, that also may be another factor, is that while virtual worlds are very good for being social, it may not be the way that everybody wants to learn. And I think that's about as succinct as I can be.
I can add just a a couple brief things to all these great points. First of all, the idea that the metaverse, like an open sim, that it would all be connected with one avatar, and that, in some ways that's a corporate fantasy of surveillance and control, that you have one identity that moves everywhere. The idea that people want to have one thing everywhere for playing a game or being in different kinds of contexts is not something that is coming from the grassroots, so to speak. But it's about, government control and corporate surveillance, at least in part. And if some of you saw the recent Super Bowl ad with the new thing where you can connect all the Ring, the Ring security cameras together, and they have this thing of how then it uses AI to recognize the lost dog, and it shows an entire neighborhood, everything's connected, so they use AI to find the dog. And there's been a lot of commentary about, how do you get people to accept the surveillance state? Puppies. That's the secret, right? Because obviously you could tweak that to track people, and this, the idea that one size fits all, or the interoperability is something that makes sense in every context is a thesis to be proven. Let's put it that way. And just very briefly as well, just the amazing work that the people on the stage and in this room and elsewhere do in virtual worlds, that still just scratches the surface of what's possible. If we had more support, I know at my university there's basically none, for the possibilities around virtual worlds for education. And we can't let COVID determine the horizon of what's possible. We were all thrown into the deep end of the pool in that. But even when I was teaching classes in Second Life, and I had an island, and doing things like having groups of students do research projects that they could then each had a piece of land to create a build about their project, and then they could share it with the other students, but also anyone in Second Life could teleport in. And it was an amazing experience. It got written up in Wired magazine, and then there was also like a campground for them to hang out when they were, sort of lonely or bored because of COVID. But compared to Zoom, and there's been research about the cognitive fatigue that comes from seeing multiple faces on a grid. That's perceptually not how humans are designed to engage with faces. It's like 20 of them in your face, or even 10. The potential for virtual worlds for education, and even just think of things like the Spaceflight Museum or the amazing conferences that we see, like best practices in education. I still am just struck by how little we've even begun to scratch the surface of it. And I agree as well with, that what people are saying, that very little of it will necessarily have to do with VR. And once again, VR is amazing. Like this, it's the tech hype that puts us in this mentality that it's all or nothing, that either it's going to be the Matrix and we plug in like Keanu Reeves, or nothing. And that's such an unhelpful way to think about these technologies, because they layer over time and get used in different ways. I mean, the only technology that's ever really gone away, and it's still sort of around, but the only one that's ever really gone away is the telegraph, right? Radio, well over a century old, is still around. Now, some of it's internet radio, but it's still around, right? Television, movies, like these technologies usually layer. They don't push each other out. They layer and transform. And VR can do a lot of wonderful things. But when the tech industry sets it up as the thing with a capital T that's going to change the entire world, and if not, it's a failure and let's move on to AI or the next thing that might make us a trillionaire, all of the interesting questions get missed, and all of the interesting potential gets missed. And that, I feel like we spend so much of our time, rightly so, sort of calling that out and talking about how that all or nothing kind of mentality. I mean, if I have to hear one more time when I tell people I study Second Life, like, oh, is Second Life still around? And, I've done research in Indonesia for a long time, and no one asks me, is Indonesia still around? And, I say it has like a 500,000 active users. That's more than a lot of countries. Like, why does everything have to be Roblox to be interesting? It's such a empirically inaccurate way of thinking about things. And by looking at the bigger and the smaller stuff, we learn so much, because most human culture and most human community is the small stuff. Most human culture and most human community is the small stuff. And even the big stuff, like something like Roblox, has individual games or things inside of it. It's not just one giant thing. And I think, people here on this stage and in this room have been, exploding pioneers at really looking at those possibilities and implementing them in education. And just one last quick example thing I just want to throw out there, because this is something that happened 15 years ago, and it's in my Second Life book a bit, and I talk about it every so often, just as a quick example, because someone was talking about the adult education. There are, as we all know, there's groups of people in Second Life who role play as children, right? And not for sexual reasons, but because they want to be a kid again, right? Why not? It's a big thing in Second Life, has been from the beginning, actually. There's whole families. And there was a group in Second Life that had built a really cool elementary school with a gym and classrooms and all this kind of thing. I'm not going to name it for confidentiality, but I was doing that as part of my field work. And some of the people, the kids, but obviously these are adults with child avatars, they said, Mr. Professor Boellstorff, you should come teach a class here. You should come teach. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Sure, right? I'm a good anthropologist, right? You go along with what the people want you to do. With there are limits, but this is reasonable. So they're like, Professor Boellstorff, come teach a class here. So I came, and so many of the kids wanted to do it that we actually had to do it in the gym of this school, and we wouldn't fit in a classroom. And there were several adult people role playing as adult teachers' aides, but it was mostly all these kids, right? 30 of them, which back then we're talking like Crash the Sim, number of people. But I thought, just for the fun of it, and this was so long ago, it was text only. We didn't have voice yet. But I thought, for the fun of it, I want to teach them something that I know they don't know. And I speak the Indonesian language fluently because I did research there. So I thought, I'm going to teach Indonesian, like basics to the Indonesian language. Should be sort of fun. And sort of teach some basic words, how the grammar works. This is about an hour and a half long class. And, the kids in the gym were like, how do I say that Susie is a dum-dum? And I would say, in Indonesian. And then Susie would say, well, how do I say that he is a poo head, or that he, or that, or how do I say that I like her dress or whatever? And it was hilarious. And I had some little note cards, but we were doing it all in text very, quickly. It wasn't people Googling anything back then. But what blew me away was after an hour, they were making up new sentences in Indonesian, like with the correct grammar, like in a completely unrelated language to any Romance, Western language. And was there something about being a kid in a learning space, in a sense of role playing a kid, but also the school itself in Second Life, not just pretending to be a kid, but being a group in a school, if you see what I'm saying, together with other people, that was allowing them permission to plug into a kind of openness to learning. And I never did like a real scientific kind of, study on it, but I can tell you, I could not believe how fast they were learning Indonesian. And it just was one of those moments that made me think, gosh, there's such potential around these. And this had nothing to do with VR. It had nothing to do, it just had to do with the basic thing of a shared virtual world where it wasn't just avatars, but it was a school with benches and a teacher in front with a chalkboard. It was an amazing experience.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I love everything you just said, Tom. And I really did want to speak to that because I've talked a lot about like what I've always called all this is Burning Man in cyberspace. The playful tinkering that that Csikszentmihalyi flow of, you're challenging yourself, but you're having a lot of fun and you push yourself more. I just want to say, too, that I think it's really critical to have your voice as an anthropologist. And I would love to see more educators from the social sciences, anthropology, sociology, because talking about the culture aspect, that what you observe as an academic and who understands the cultural thing, I just use the blanket term, the social, right? But understanding people and populations and how relationships are nurtured, all of this is dovetailed in, and that's what has made Second Life so powerful. And it is such a powerful tool and can be for learning for the people who will avail themselves of what's available to them, and it's been available for all this time. But we need educators to be at the tables where all those conversations are having about, this great tool, this, you know, we're going to buy the Metaverse, you know, Meta's new headset or somebody else's new headset or whatever. They need to, this is the missing piece. They are the amount of knowledge that has come out of so many years in this space, right? We have a very mature community of practice because we have a space where we run into each other. We go to these conferences, we talk to each other, we hang out, we go to a dance party here in World or whatever. We have run into each other over and over and over again over the years. And that's those, so these relationships, this isn't something you get at a virtual conference in Zoom. And this is the missing piece for people to be able to work outside of their little isolated silos on their own campus, to work more globally, you know, and you know, everybody wants that. They want their colleagues to work with other people around the world. And I don't see any other way to do that unless we nurture virtual environments for, you know, places to actually socialize and run into each other. You know, if I log in and, you know, and if you were online, Tom, you know, I don't come in all the time, but if you were here and I wasn't really super busy doing something, I might ping you and say, hey, what are you up to? Blah, blah, blah. You know, that kind of thing is so important for education and for being able to talk about the future of how we use these spaces. We've got to be able to, you know, but the purposeful tinkering thing, I've talked about that. The playful aspect cannot be overstated. It is absolutely part of the secret sauce.
I totally agree with that, Bethany, in the social aspect and the playful tinkering, but also in addition, the actual scientific learning. Immersive learning brings power to understanding and knowledge because you can visualize things in such unique ways and experience things that you couldn't possibly do in the physical world. Examples like entering the human heart, going inside the human brain, but then also you can experience things with literacy, such as when you read about history or you read a great classic novel in literature, then you can actually enter that historical era. You can enter that story, such as Macbeth or A Christmas Carol. So for me, my research in changing literacy has now confirmed that this is important because coding and building in 3D, those are now literacy skills that we can start teaching at a young age. But reading is still the foundation of knowledge. That language is our most important human trait. But since literacy has expanded to include 3D experiences and creativity, both of which are now greatly being impacted by AI, I want to point out that it'll soon be impossible to teach others without understanding the best practices of AI. And I think perhaps the metaverse may be a really good platform for developing those skills. So I'm currently researching the impact of AI on literacy, and we'll have a chapter coming out in a book called AI and Meta Literacy to share some metaverse teaching examples.
Wow, that is all amazing discussion. We went, I think, way beyond the initial questions, but so grateful for this discussion because I think we're really getting at the future right here. Where's the future really going in terms of what are the human potentials in the virtual world? What are the 3D potentials for achieving virtual learning? So, but maybe moving on to the next question can also relate here because it's taken the other side. What virtual worlds are young people using, and how do we use that to motivate instructors to deliver education in these virtual worlds?
Oh, you know what? I gotta say, I don't think we can convince anybody to use virtual worlds. That I'm just gonna say, from working with faculty, I wish, because I know you guys all here are not like that, but I don't think we can convince people to use virtual environments. I think that people are either attracted to this, they either jump in and get excited. That's what I see. It's always very binary. People either come in, and I even see this with the browser base, which is the easiest way to get into a virtual environment. Some people come and they just don't love it. They just don't, it just doesn't click for them. The other people are the exact opposite. They're like us. They get excited. They go, oh my God, I can do anything. And their mind just explodes with possibilities. So I don't think we can convince people to use these spaces for education, but
I think that's a great point, but the kids are already there. You know? Yeah, and the biggest platform that Marie mentioned earlier, Roblox, yet parents are telling me there's a lot of shenanigans going on in Roblox and they don't want their children exposed to it. And that was recently confirmed by one of our VR Exploder visitors just a few weeks ago. She mentioned the adults trolling for kids in Roblox that she actually has witnessed. So it's a tough time in the wild west of the metaverse right now. My visit to Roblox games, I found very little serious education. A lot of silly kid created games. When I searched for education, I got the evil cafeteria lady and the teacher from hell. So a visit to a Roblox simulated classroom built by kids, I was bombarded with middle schoolers running around shouting crude nonsense. But there are a few beautiful science simulations, and there's the history of computing technology. So it's tough to figure out how to teach kids when the educators don't understand virtual worlds, but the kids are already there. So currently I'm working with kids in Minecraft. There's just a problem that most of them prefer slaying zombies and each other to the hard work of academics in the metaverse. So we have to learn how to steer them. Keep the playful tinkering that Bethany's pointed out, but also teach them, that they're prosumers, both producing and consuming content as digital citizens. And that's not easy to do.
Just to add a couple of quick things to that, in terms of the prosumers, one thing too is the question of child labor in Roblox and elsewhere, where kids are making games and being underpaid or not paid for it. But the main point I wanted to throw in that we're hitting on here is that Richard Bartle, who is one of the founders of creating virtual worlds, who wrote the book Designing Virtual Worlds and created one of the first MUDs, has a wonderful statement about how virtual worlds aren't games. Even the ones designed to be games aren't games. The Pasadena Rose Bowl Stadium is not a game, and that is such a true point, right? The virtual worlds are not games. You can also have a conference in them or a music concert. However, as we all know, first of all, virtual worlds can have games inside of them, like Second Life can. You can play Tringo or other games inside of Second Life, or role-playing inside of Second Life. And if you look at Roblox, not everything in Roblox is a game. We just saw examples of like history exhibits or whatever, but a lot of them are. But in terms of where kids are going, or an ongoing issue, is that if you look at the top 10, the top 50, the top 100 virtual worlds out there, the vast majority are predominantly designed as games. We're talking about things like Fortnite, right? League of Legends. And even in those, which are like games, like people do esports with them, right? Even those ones are designed as games. People hang out and talk about how their day at work went. People flirt and make friends and have weddings inside of them, right? World of Warcraft being another early classic example. So even the virtual worlds that are designed to basically be games have an incredible amount of non-game activity going inside of them. But we have this basic issue then where virtual worlds are not games, but they all have gaming elements in them usually, and some of them a lot, and some of them not. And one thing that I would just sort of throw out there, just leave as a question for future discussion, because many of you know much more about this than me. There's by now a long literature out there to quote Ian Bogost, that gamification is bullshit. that the idea that that we can use video games and gaming as the magic pill medication, perfect, has been fairly debunked and questioned. That there may be some cases in which it does great, and in a way it depends on what you define as a game or play. Like my example of the kids pretending to be kids, right, is one kind of example. But one thing to throw out there is when we're in a world where most of the biggest virtual worlds are either very much 95% oriented around gameplay, or like a Minecraft or Roblox, can have flexibility but have a lot of gaming in them. how should we respond to that? Like, what are there ways in which gamification is still an unexplored frontier and there's potential there? Is it that we want to leverage gaming as a way to get people interested in other parts of education that aren't, built around gaming? I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing it out there because that is such a big part of these online spaces, and not to say it's horrible or a magic pill or anything, but that it seems like it's a big part of what we encounter one way or another.
We've
Um,
got about 10 minutes left, but go ahead, Marie.
Yeah, what I wanted to address a couple of things that were said. So I agree that it's really hard to get people interested. I'm gonna call us old people interested in using these platforms. So as part of the classes that I teach, I require my students to build an immersive experience on one of the social virtual reality platforms, and they have to decide. They go off and they look at like 5 or 10 of them, and they know what they're going to do, and then they figure out what is the best platform for the experience that they're trying to build. And at the end of the semester, I hear the exact same thing. I had no idea that these things existed. I thought they were all for games, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to be using these for my own, my own work and my own thing. And so I do believe that we're at a point now where a lot of these kids are getting old enough that they're starting university and maybe in many cases finishing university. And I think those are the ones that are going to be the most open to using these platforms in general. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that that every one of these platforms, there's different things about it, and that it's important to understand what you can and cannot do in them, and you have to map that to the experience that you want to build. And that's it.
Hey, that was a great segue to our next question also, which is, under what circumstances do we use different platforms for education?
I mean,
I can
that's exactly it. I
can start with, I think we have to have a balance. We have to strive to a balance between the virtual and the digital, between the physical and the virtual world. They're equally valid. And this is why I keep using the term metamodernism. We oscillate all the time between the physical and the virtual world. Even if you're not in a virtual world, you take out your cell phone and you disappear from the people around you. We oscillate between consuming and producing. We're prosumers. Between learning alone and collaborating with others. Between respect for the past history and traditions and respect for future innovation. All of this oscillation. So working in virtual environments helps us understand that balance at what seems like opposing concepts, and we have to teach it from a young age. I mentioned that the problem is teachers have very little training in 3D worlds. The kids teach themselves. They talk on the playground about Roblox. And in Minecraft, they're teaching me how to code. They already know the skills, but there's this gap between working at home and gaming at home and what they learn in school. There's a gap, and they're not learning digital citizenship and emerging AI. I don't blame the teachers. It's not their fault that all of this has disrupted pedagogy, curriculum, and life. But this expert series here illustrates that educators must add to their toolboxes for teaching in the future. And they need to be aware so they can choose which trends and which tools to adopt, because we can only do that together. And that's why I'm in the VR Exploders, because we couldn't possibly keep up alone.
I totally concur with that, Val. And I really do think that everybody here in Second Life, in our audience, everybody who's an educator, you guys have all paved the way for this. It's just that everything has taken much, much longer for things to adopt. And I want to second what Maria had said too about, the kids that are growing up in these spaces, and what she's having her students do. The kids that you're working with, Val, too, the ones working in Minecraft and Roblox, they are going to be the teachers in the future. So all of this learning, digital citizenship skills and whatnot, we're still in a a period where this hasn't matured. I really envision a future. This is my most optimistic vision. I envision a future where children, if it's appropriate at a certain age, like they should be doing a lot offline, obviously. But I would love to see virtual spaces in VR, whether it's desktop or with headsets or blah, 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 half and half mix or whatever, where they're doing learning activities, gamified learning activities. And again, that's going to be developed by people who've grown up with using games and learning how to leverage it for teaching and learning. And kids and people using these spaces for productive educational use, and then getting off the computer and being part of the physical world, right? Too much of, I think of what we've, a lot of gaming has been sort of an escape from the world. And it's great. I use it too. Like I build in Second Life because it's how we all decompress, right? But I imagine a world where people are collaborating and building and doing stuff in virtual spaces for teaching and learning. And actually then, you get off the computer and you have dinner with your family and your friends, and you go out and you go dancing with your friends, and you go off play in the playground and get dirty and play in the mud. So there's some time to be with the technology, and I would love to see the technology leveraged more for education than for fun. I mean, it could still be fun, but hopefully that makes sense.
I think a lot of great discussion, and I really like that. Hopefully education, not just fun, that we want to accomplish things here using these massive technologies that we're so lucky to find ourselves in this era of civilization in many ways. Hey, we're coming down to the wire here. If we can get just a quick last minute soundbite from everyone, maybe starting down the road, starting with Marie, and we can just see, is there some key point you want to leave us with? Like,
yeah, join the VR Exploders Club and come have fun with us.
Okay, Bethany?
Oh yeah, definitely do that. And also get involved with outside of the virtual environments with people who are interested in VR for teaching and learning, because they need your voice. You have all these years of experience in this virtual environment. You guys have a lot of expertise that is sorely missing in conversations.
Thanks, Tom.
Keep on exploding.
All right. Val?
There's hope for the future, and these guys are helping me find it. Thanks.
Okay. Shannon?
Never be afraid to keep learning new ideas, bringing people together.
Okay.
And this is one way to do it.
Thank you all. Yeah, an amazing discussion covering a lot of ground, and really appreciate being here, hearing all the sage advice. Thank you so much. There will be a little break time, I think, maybe after this. So if you want to stick around to join us, then we'll move to that area, and you'll see it. Our panelists are facing the area where the breakout is. So if we can move in that direction, we'll have a chance to continue in a more casual form of discussion if you're able to stick around. Thanks.